you guys doing today?
Good.
Did you learn all about the press?
Yeah.
So, one of the fun things that we can talk about is this year, the Yuma Sun is celebrating its 150th anniversary. 150 years covering news in Yuma County, which is pretty amazing, isn't it? Our paper started on March 16th, 1872. The date is behind you guys on the wall. And you can see the very first name of the newspaper was the Arizona Sentinel. Because Yuma was not yet known as Yuma. We were called Arizona City. There were fewer than 1,200 people who lived here at that time. And it wasn't until 1873, almost a year after the Arizona Sentinel was founded, that the Arizona City became Yuma. They changed the name of the city, but the newspaper didn't change its name for a long time. We stayed with the Arizona Sentinel because that's who we were. We covered the news in Yuma County and over into California. And we stayed that way even when Yuma became a state, or Arizona became a state in 1912. We had a flood, we were still the Arizona Sentinel, so it was a long time before we changed the name. Right there behind you. 1916, a massive flood came through Yuma and wiped out pretty much everything on Main Street. Because there's a lot of dams on the river and they rerouted some of the river, so it doesn't flood like it used to. Which is good news for Yuma, because that let our city grow and thrive. But up until that point, we were at risk of floods all the time. 1916, it pretty much wiped out Main Street, except for this building, which is still in existence down on Main. It had a lot of water damage, but they were able to salvage the building. Yes?
Is that why we barely get water?
No, we barely get water because of dams and years of drought. And we live in this magical place called the desert, where it doesn't rain very often. So that does impact the whole thing a little bit. Back then, however, floods were a huge problem. It wiped out our newspaper building, and in the process, we lost all of our archives. From 1872 to 1916, we had very few surviving newspapers from that time. But what was amazing about it was that the guy who owned the newspaper at the time saw the flood coming. He went into the building, he removed the press, took it to higher ground, and was able to continue printing despite this massive flood. That's the passion for journalism, is you want to keep providing news for your community. Whether there's a flood or a fire or some other natural catastrophe, you find ways to keep that paper going. We've managed to print this paper with nonstop for 150 years, pretty much. We have never missed an edition in the time that Lisa and I have worked here, which is like 30 years. We've never missed an edition. We keep the paper going. We've lost power to the entire city. We found a way to get the paper out. We have had hurricanes. We got the paper out. We've had floods. We got the paper out. Because that's our job, is to provide the news to the community one way or the other. We persevere and get that paper out. So let's walk through and look at some historical papers. You guys want to come this way? Herds of children. The downside of losing your archives in a massive flood in 1916 is you don't have things like the first newspaper ever printed by your paper. We don't have it. We do have the second one, however, March 23rd, 1872. So you guys can take a look at this paper and see what was news at the time. Because we weren't yet a state, we were a territory, so there's a lot of territorial news in here. We had advertising on the front page of the paper, even in 1872, including 5 attorneys still printing on the front page. It's kind of strange, right? Then we're going to come around the corner. Around the corner. You guys can shuffle in here and look a little bit. We're going to go forward in time quite a bit to 2012. So I'm guessing you guys were born 2010, 11, 12?
Yeah.
Somewhere in that neighborhood? So these papers, 2012, fun fact, was Arizona's 100th birthday. Yes.
Did Mexico and USA have a war?
Yes, the Mexican-American War.
I told you.
Yeah. That might have been before all of our time, however, but not the newspapers that covered the war. And we'll see more of that at the very end of the museum. You'll see papers from that time frame. They're there. So, what was a big event in history just last week? What was the anniversary that was celebrated?
9/11.
9/11. I was working in the newsroom on September 11th, 2001, when the 2 planes hit the Twin Towers in the Pentagon in a field in Pennsylvania. And if you turn around on this wall, State of Shock is how the newspaper covered it that day. So you can see what happened nationally, but you can also see in Yuma that every base and federal office closed, but the border stayed open, and what was happening around our community at that time. Not only did we have September 11th and shock and horror and a lot of sadness, we had an election that night. There was still a primary that went on in Yuma County. So we still had to cover a national disaster, a tragic incident, and an election on the same night. So it was a very busy, long night for our newsroom. So we're going to go around this way. If you guys step over into the corner, you'll see some newspapers that have comics from the 1980s. You can see what the comic strips look like. One of our main jobs as a newspaper is to record history in whatever form that history takes. Sometimes it's when the tribe gets to gain 2,500 acres of property. Sometimes it's a roller skating Santa Claus. Do you guys roller skate today?
No.
What do you do? Skateboard. Scooters? No? Just skateboards and bikes. I hear roller skating is making a comeback, so we might see Santa Claus's roller skating again sometime soon. If they do, let me know. So I'm going to take a photo and put them in the paper. As far as I'm concerned, he is. And we're going to move this way. So pause right there, guys, and flip back around this way. 1977, a hurricane came through Yuma. We had a lot of rain in the last couple of weeks. It was quite the mess, right? Yep. Rain everywhere. 1977, in one day, we had 7 inches of rain. Wiped out Interstate 8. Of course, that makes front page news. When something wipes out your interstate, it becomes front page news. It doesn't happen every day. Going back to that recording history, at the same time, Elvis also passed away. Same day. So we had to figure out how to balance a massive hurricane in Yuma versus the death of arguably one of the most famous people at that time, right? Elvis? Do you guys know who President Nixon is?
No.
Yes, no, maybe? No. Mixed results? Okay. He was a president. He was forced to resign. Yep. Big news, big news. So he's got pretty much the entire front page of the paper. When you record history, you have to get more than just like the highlights, right? You get in depth. People keep these. They go back and they look at them and they're like, oh, I remember. I was a child when this happened. My mom kept this newspaper because it was such an impactful moment. Something you really can't get from TV news. You can't keep a TV coverage, right? You can keep your newspaper, recording history. So let's go back this way a little bit. What do you guys know about Star Wars? Do we have any Star Wars fans here?
Absolutely yes.
Raise your paws if you love some Star Wars. Mandalorian. What do you got? Everybody fans? Do you guys know what Star Wars movie was filmed in Yuma?
Yeah, in the sand dunes.
Which one? Return of the Jedi was filmed in Yuma County, and the sand dunes next to us in Imperial County. If you guys look over in that glass case on the second shelf, you can see some of the photos from that day, from the time that they were here covering, or that they were recording the movie. So you can see the skiff that they built in the desert, and Princess Leia and Han Solo and Luke Skywalker doing their thing back there. On the wall behind you, you'll see coverage of the Korean War and how the newspaper covered that. 1950s. Then we'll go into the 1940s, coming back around this way. And what was the big thing that happened in late 1930s to 1945?
Germany's invasion.
What did Germany do?
Germany invaded Austria, they also invaded a little bit of Czechoslovakia, and they took the rest of it, and then they invaded Poland.
What did that become?
World War II.
Very good. World War II coverage on these walls right through here. So when you come back to 1934, Hitler seizes unchallenged control of Germany. And here's a photo of Hitler in 1934. Nobody really knew what that meant at that time. This is before everything went a little topsy-turvy, right? But this is how the newspaper covered it as Hitler became president of Germany. Until it went a little crazy.
And then
Be careful, you guys, please. So Japan.
yeah, they attacked Pearl Harbor.
So there's the declaration of war after Pearl Harbor. So we're going to go that way.
Please do not touch the walls, you guys. Be careful.
Well, Japan bombed us and we declared war.
Oh yeah.
Kind of, they were friends. Similar events.
But they're still friends.
They're friends today, yes. So we're going way back in time now, guys. We're going to look at this side of the wall for just a few minutes. Has everybody been to the Ocean to Ocean Bridge? You know where that is? Woo, sorry.
It's between California.
Perfect. That bridge was dedicated in 1915, and this is how the newspaper covered it. At this point in time, it's very hard to get photos in the newspaper. You'll notice as you go back in time, there are less pictures in the paper because we didn't have the ability to print photos. That was such an emerging technology. Today, we take it for granted. We have photos in the paper every single day, and you can tell amazing stories just through photos. You don't always need words. However, then, this is a big deal. We had to take this print up to Phoenix, have it treated in Phoenix, and then brought back down. In 1915, you didn't have a car to make that trip in 3 hours, right? You're talking a much longer journey. So this is a several-day process to get a single photo printed in this newspaper. But the Ocean to Ocean Bridge was such a big deal that it was worth doing. And so the newspaper editors at that time made it happen. We also had a smuggler band caught by the sheriff, and that just kind of makes me laugh, because in my head I see a band of people playing music. But I don't think that's what they meant.
Wait, we had sheriffs back then?
Yes.
You know what they're, do you know the two oldest entities in Yuma are? The Yuma Sun and the Yuma County Sheriff's Department are the two oldest entities in the city of Yuma, Yuma County.
Arizona is now a state.
Yeah, so, 1912, Arizona became a state based on the newspaper design. It's this little tiny strip of paper. If you go all the way back here, in this back corner, 1873, this is the town of Yuma becoming Yuma instead of Arizona City. 1873, it's page 5 news. It didn't even make the front page. They were just not that excited about it. Tucked on page 5. Little tiny paragraph. It's different how we treat news today. That'd be front page if the city of Yuma became, say, Phoenix, and we just randomly changed our name, right? Front page news would be a big deal. Here was a single paragraph. So going back to photography is one of the key things that we do in our newspaper, and to celebrate photography, we dedicated an entire wall to the different photos through time. You can see everything from the plank road that goes across the sand dunes, to bridges being built to the Harriers out at Marine Corps Air Station Yuma. So if you guys want to take a look at the photos for a few seconds, then we'll travel into the conference room and you guys can ask questions. Sound good?